Today, my wife and I are visiting Colonial Williamsburg, an amazing living history museum in Virginia that tells the early part of America's enduring story. Come along with me and my wife as we explore a history buff's paradise. That's coming up next.
Welcome to the kitchen. What we're doing now is Ian Coley here is getting his beetroot ready. He's baked it and he's going to basically he's got it in a white wine batter and he's going to put in breadcrumbs and fry it off in lard. Nice. William Parker, who's James Anderson's cook, is going to give you stew and bread every day.
So then this is basically representing the kitchen for the Army?
Yeah. William Parker is James Anderson's cook, but he's feeding all the Armory workers, so he's feeding 40 men here.
So how mobile or permanent was the kitchen setup? Was it like always in the building, or would it have been like in a tent when they were on the campaign?
Oh, well, this one here, because we are basically like an industry. Mm-hmm. The old tavern, this used to be the old tavern kitchen that James Anderson gets. And this is where he puts his workers up. Now, this is nothing like a campaign kitchen. Campaign kitchen will just be lean-to and so this is, if you can afford a separate building, you're wealthy. 95% of us are going to have our kitchen in our house because we're poor.
Okay.
Welcome to our tin shop. Have you ever visited us in here before? Okay, well, we're here as part of the Armory. So everything that we're manufacturing was being made for soldiers and sailors of Virginia during the War for Independence. All the items that you see here on the bench are actually based off of the day book that survives. So we do have a written record for our shop that tells us what we're manufacturing, how many items we're producing, who it went to, and when it leaves the shop. So it's a lot of items like cooking kettles, coffee pots, cups, measures, but also items like lanterns, tinder boxes, speaking trumpets, and artillery canisters too. And everything here is made from tin-plated iron. So we're just working with a plated sheet of wrought iron that has a coating of tin on the outside. So we start with that sheet and trace out patterns kind of like a tailor. After we cut out the sheets, then we fold it over the stakes. And then after we've got the shape that we want, we can solder parts together. So for soldering, we just have a small stove over in the window. We're heating up soldering coppers, so we can carry the solder to the seam and basically hot glue with metal. But tinware is something you'd have in your household. Everyone has it, everyone's using it, no matter who they are or what level of society they are. Eventually tinware does get rusty. It's not going to last forever, so eventually it will also get thrown out. So right now Tom is setting a wire into the top edge of a porridge tray that he's learning how to make. So the wire is a reinforcing material that we set into a lot of pieces, so it provides structural strength and reinforcement around that edge. It also tucks in the sharp edge of the tin to help keep it from cutting, especially if it's the rim of a cup. You don't really want to put your mouth against something that's sharp.
And honestly, even though it is hot in the summertime, it does have its own advantages that it brings. You gotta remember, we're working in a time period before the advent of cheap, high-quality artificial lighting. The best we've got are candles, and they're pretty expensive. So we're working sun up to sundown. Those are the hours of the day that I can see what I'm doing and get good work done, at least for our trade. There's some coarser trades that can work through the night, but for our work, I absolutely need sunlight. So I got longer days, I can work longer hours, I can make more money in the summertime, even though I might be less comfortable during the season trades. right now, the smith here at the anvil is working on making a hacksaw frame, the actual frame that holds the blade. So he's just working on shaping that little pearl there. I work on making all sorts of things like cooking tools, tools for tradesmen, tools for farmers, hardware for putting together buildings, hardware for putting together wheeled vehicles. That keeps our shop pretty busy.
I had a question.
Yes.
I visited a couple different living history museums. One in like Florida that does the 1600s, another in Michigan that does 1800s, and they all have blacksmiths, and it's been neat to see all of them. How much does the art of blacksmithing change from century to century, or is it pretty similar?
There are differences, but I think there's more similarities than there are differences. Even modern blacksmiths are fairly similar to 250 years ago. This style of forge is still built and used. I know plenty of blacksmiths who use a forge of this style. If you're going back to the 1600s, say, at the Jamestown settlement, I'm not quite sure if they were that established yet, but if you were to build a brick fire in the 1600s, rather than having the chimney off to the side, it was usually centered over the fire with a large funnel going up to it. The theory of aerodynamics at that time was that air behaved exactly like a liquid, which it does, but it has different qualities that come out more readily in air than in water. So one factor is that you very seldom are trying to direct around highly heated water that isn't dispersed with a lot of other water. So with the heated air coming off of the fire, if we direct that up the chimney, we can create a natural draft that sucks the air up. That's an 18th century innovation. The Venturi effect, Bernoulli's principle, it's the same idea. But that's this brickwork here. So that's 18th century innovation. Earlier than that, you wouldn't see this. Now, the way of actually shaping the metal is practically unchanged forever. Even prior to the Iron Age, shaping brass and copper and bronze, hammering on an anvil. Now, the design of the anvil might have changed, the design of the work might have changed, but the core concepts haven't. So that's another big feature you're going to see is the style of the hinges. So here are everything. I was going to use hinges as an example. This is an HL hinge. This is a very common style from the 18th century. Here's an H hinge that's also common. You're going to see these on doors all around town. There's a style of hinge that's popular in the 17th century that we don't see anymore. It's called a cock's head hinge because it has this really decorative scroll that looks like a rooster's head. Very ornate, complicated things to make. You don't see them in this period. You see them earlier. The styles change. Another major difference in some very ancient work, predating, you're going back to, say, the hundreds. Before a lot of this is actually working standing. A lot of very ancient smiths worked sitting on the ground.
What do you think about this?
It's kind of a European innovation to start standing while doing your work. There's a couple advantages to working on the ground I've seen. One is you don't need all of the structure. Just on the ground, you set your anvil on the ground, you set your fire in a hole in the dirt. It's a lot easier to set up that sort of a business. Now, you do have to be used to sitting on the ground all the time. That's a little bit uncomfortable if you're not used to it. There's some difficulties. You'll have as much clearance around the tools because they're located on the ground. But you still do see cultures in some parts of the world that still work sitting, doing this work. In India, around that region, certain regions of Asia, I know in Japan, in Africa, working while seated is still a very common thing. It's also very interesting with a lot of those smiths that are still carrying over those ancient practices that their work, even though they're seated, a lot of their work is actually more similar to the way that we work than how a modern smith works. So it is very often that we'll watch some Indian smith working and pick up all of these little tricks that they use that we can apply in our work and isn't inaccurate. But a lot of it is fairly unchanged.
Hello there.
Hello. So is this some sort of contraption to help steer animals?
It's a cart body.
A what?
It's a horse cart.
Okay.
So you can see where the horse goes, right about here.
Mm-hmm.
And then the body here will go onto this pair of wheels. This will be used in town. So carts really are your pickup truck of the 1700s. Very common vehicle. They're more affordable than a wagon. Carry less freight, but the average farmer doesn't need to carry 3 tons of anything. They don't have 3 tons of anything. They've got 3/4 of a ton or a ton. Hence the pickup truck analogy. Our shop today is a wheelwright shop, builds what you see rolling through town. Carts, wagons, carriages. We're responsible for anything. We do work for other museums periodically as well. It's a combination of oak and ash on this particular project. It's working on parts that will support the bed or the flooring of the vehicle. Because as you see, there's a major flaw with this vehicle right now. You got a place for the horse, but where's the stuff going to go? Take it in slightly, so when the dowel goes through, it will draw the joint together flush. But you can't even put a piece of paper through it, it's so tight.
Good day.
How are you today?
Very good.
Please don't feel shy. We're pretty informal, so anything that grabs your attention, you can ask me about. I'll be happy to respond.
So, my main question is, are you making like accessories for soldiers' outfits, or?
Well, I don't think I would call it accessories. I think I would call it equipment.
Okay.
Or accoutrement. What I'm doing right now is making up a bayonet belt. At other times, though, it's much more likely to be shoes or cartridge pouches. Although I have to say that the most likely item here is going to be shoes. That's what the soldiers use up the most of.
About how long would a good pair of shoes last for a soldier?
3-4 months. You got to keep in mind the amount of mileage that he's putting on them, and also the fact that during the campaign season, which is basically the end of May, beginning of June to the beginning of December, he's living outdoors. So if it's if it's rainy, he's wet. If it's dry, he's dry. And a lot of times, if he's got soaked shoes, he doesn't have a backup pair to put on to allow the others to dry, and they will wear very, very quickly as a result of that.
Certainly. Cool.
At the moment, I'm just tacking my pieces together. Those little tacks act pretty much like a common pin for a tailor, and it just holds the work for me until I have time to get it stitched down.
Reminds me of like pins in sewing.
Yeah, it's doing the same thing, and as I get to them, I'll extract them. Biggest difference is your pins you probably save. These little wire tacks, once I've driven them the first time I extract them, they're done.
Interesting.
Well, there's a little leader on them, and once you drive it, it's bent, and it won't drive true again.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Have a great visit with us.
Well, that's a wrap for this Colonial Williamsburg video. I hope you really enjoyed it, getting to see another part of this amazing living history museum. If you like this sort of stuff, check out my other videos. Check out colonialwilliamsburg.org to plan your own visit here, because it's so much cooler in real life than it is on film. Till next time, this is History Buff, TN Photobug signing out, and I'm having a blast with the past.